the world consists of both the living and the non-living. But how do we segregate the two? We can do so by looking out for certain characteristics associated with living organisms. However, these characteristics can be definitive or non-definitive. One such characteristic is growth. Living organisms, whether multicellular or unicellular, grow due to cell division. However, cell division affects these organisms differently. In a multicellular organism, cell division results in an increase in mass, whereas in a unicellular organism like amoeba, it leads to the formation of two new organisms. Interestingly, plants grow through cell division throughout their lifespan, while animals, including humans, grow up to a certain age. After that, cell division occurs only when the body has to replace lost cells in certain tissues. However, everything that grows cannot be said to be a living organism. Take the example of a rock that will grow in size if sand gets deposited over it. However, this growth is external. On the contrary, growth in living organisms is internal. Growth is, thus, a characteristic feature of living organisms, though it is a non-definitive one. Reproduction is another important characteristic of living organisms. In unicellular organisms, reproduction and growth are synonymous, as both lead to an increase in the number of cells. This is not the case with multicellular organisms, where reproduction leads to the creation of an offspring. These organisms reproduce either sexually or asexually. Sexual reproduction can be seen in higher organisms like man and animals. Asexual reproduction can be seen in lower organisms through budding as seen in yeast, or through fragmentation as observed in flatworm. However, certain organisms, such as sterile worker bees, are not capable of reproducing. But that doesn't mean they are non-living. Reproduction is therefore not a definitive characteristic of the living. Metabolism is also a characteristic of living organisms. We know that organisms are made up of chemicals. These chemicals are constantly produced in living beings and converted into biomolecules. These conversions are called chemical or metabolic reactions. The sum total of all such reactions is known as metabolism. It is interesting to note that such chemical reactions can also be imitated in a laboratory. However, such isolated reactions taking place in vitro are not considered living organisms, but are classified as living reactions. We can therefore state that metabolism is a definitive feature of living organisms. Cellular organization is another important characteristic of living organisms. Such organization is not observed in the non-living, and hence cellular organization is also a definitive feature in all life forms. Consciousness is another feature associated with living organisms. We know that all living organisms sense and respond to environmental stimuli such as light, water, and temperature. For instance, a sunflower always faces the sun. Humans too respond to environmental stimuli and are aware of their surroundings and themselves. For instance, in winters, they wear woolens to keep their bodies warm. Non-living objects don't respond to external stimuli. Consciousness is therefore another definitive characteristic of a living being. Thus, we can say that metabolism, cellular organization, and consciousness are the three definitive characteristics of living organisms. Earth is a diverse planet with millions of different types of fungi, plants, microorganisms, and animals. The range and diversity of living organisms increases as we increase the area of our observation. Each different kind of plant, animal, or organism represents a species. In other words, species is a group of similar individuals sharing a common gene pool and interbreeding freely, producing fertile progeny. Today, there are about 1.7 to 1.8 million species known to us, and this number is ever increasing as we explore new areas along with the old ones. The number and types of living organisms on the earth is referred to as biodiversity. It is common to find living organisms being known by different local names in different parts of the world. To avoid this confusion, the name of a living organism must be standardized such that it is known by the same name the world over. This process is known as nomenclature. However, to name an organism, we need to know its correct description and to what organism the name is attached to. This is known as identification. To make the process of identification easier, scientists have assigned a scientific or biological name to every known organism. The scientific names for plants are based on the principles and criteria given in the International Code for Botanical Nomenclature, or ICBN, and for animals in the International Code for Zoological Nomenclature, or ICZN. The procedures to assign a scientific name to an organism have been agreed upon by scientists and biologists all over the world. Scientific names help avoid ambiguity as each organism has just one name. However, certain universal rules are followed while providing a scientific name to a known organism. For example, the scientific name for the sacred fig, commonly known as the peepal tree in India, is Ficus religiosa. Here, as you can see, the scientific name has two components: the generic name and the specific epithet. Ficus represents the genus or the generic name, while religiosa denotes the specific epithet. This system of representing a name with two components is called binomial nomenclature and was devised by Carolus Linnaeus, also known as the father of modern taxonomy. Sometimes, the name of the author who first described the species is written at the end of the specific epithet. For example, in Ficus religiosa Linn, Linn is the abbreviated name for Linnaeus. Moreover,